All right, welcome everybody. We're going to put together a Repbox today. This is the seal kit version, as packed, coming to you. So we've got our bill of materials, our parts bag, vinyl hinges, this is our wall mount and our steel reinforcement for the base plate. And now I'm going to go through all the panels here, and I'm going to wipe them down first and foremost, just so we have a nice clean thing to start with. Put some of these over here. So I like just using these pre-moistened baby wipes. If you don't happen to have these handy, just a paper towel and some Windex works just fine. And just a quick wipe down to get rid of like the residue from the lasering process. You can see there's like, you know, a good amount of residue that's right here. Put this over here and we'll go through the rest of the BOM in a sec. So these are the side panels. The interior side panels. So the finished side of these is going to go inward inside the box, and the exterior panels will be the steel sublimated ones. Set these aside. Got the acrylic faceplate for your lid cover. Doesn't need wiping, that's masked. Put this on. So I'll do this a layer at a time and kind of talk about what each of these are. But we just lay them all out and can talk about them in order. Almost had enough room. If we try like this for now. All right, so moving from right to left, biggest to smallest panel. The one I'm wiping down right now is the back panel, so the one that actually has cuts in the middle of it. This is the inside, the finished side is the inside of the back panel, facing inwards, so it looks a little nicer when it's unloaded. The unfinished side is typically mounted on the wall or facing away, so this is the finished side inward. Okay, the next one, this here, the one with 6 holes. One with 6 holes here and 3 in the front. This is actually the base plate, and the finished side on this one goes on the bottom. Reason being that if it's wall mounted, it looks nicer from there, and then we are actually going to layer on the track guides for the rollers on top of this with the finished side up. So all of the panels have lettering, numbering on the tabs to let you know what goes where. So as you're assembling, you should be able to verify that the numbering matches up with the holes that are going into. So this one that I'm wiping down with the cut holes a little bit lower is the top plate. The finished side is the top of the top plate, facing upward. The unfinished side is the inside of the box and is not visible, so we opted to leave it out. It looks nice if it's on a desktop configuration this way. Okay, and then moving on this way here, these are the exit panels, exit plates. These are what the Bowden connectors, the pneumatic connectors, thread into, and your filament ultimately comes out of. One of them is the back panel, one of them is the front. The front panel is the one with the tabs, and we'll see as we assemble. They just go like this, so that basically you have a finish on both sides. So the sandwiching technique is common pretty much to all the smaller panels. So these here are the rear track guide. So the one with the 3 holes lays on top of the bottom panel. You'll see that as we assemble. This one here with 5 holes is actually the lid seal bar. So from the underside of the top panel, this is what holds the vinyl hinge for the top. This is the faceplate with the Repbox emblem engraved into it. And then we've got over here the track guide. So this is the center with some guides for if you have just kind of some default 5 kilo configurations, or the 9 spool for the ½ kilo size configuration, and you can choose which way to flip forward. It's reversible depending on what you plan on loading into your Repbox. This is the front track guide, the one with the 6 holes. This is what holds the bottom hinge assembly to the base plate. If you have the seal kit like we're doing on this one, this is actually the rear of the faceplate. So the finished side faces the inside of the box. This goes here, and the gasket stripping goes on the top right along here. This little engraved spot here is where your 3D printed strike plate will go for the latch to hold the latch firmly against the seals and keep as much air out of your Repbox as possible. And last but not least, this little sweet flame detail is the lid clamp. So this goes on the outside of the box on top of the acrylic, and what holds the top hinge, sandwiches the top hinge to the acrylic faceplate. Alright, that's it. Simple wipe down. I'm going to set these aside, and we're going to lay out the parts bags and talk about what each of those are. And just check everything against the BOM. So if you don't want to scratch these when you're stacking them up, you can just throw the foam sheets in between them. Set them aside until we're ready to start assembly. That's what I'm going to do. Alright, and lastly we've got our side panels. This one we use the gear pattern on. Set those aside. Alright, we're going to go through the parts bag. That's everything in there. Alright, so we've got some Bowden tube. This is the mount kit. So mounting parts. So I'll try to do this in order on the, as we have it on the BOM here. So starting, this is the lid and faceplate parts kit. Has the lid stays, the magnet latches, the Bowden connectors. And then we've got our mounting parts. These are just wall anchors. And then the lath screws are for holding the French cleat to the back of the Repbox. Our bracket bag is this one. So these are all the 3D printed corner bracket pieces and some 20mm screws that we'll use to hold some of them on. The fastener bag basically has all of the nylocks, riv nuts, and the square nuts that we need for assembly. Roller panel bag has 16 of the roller plates for assembling the rollers. The roller parts bag has the spacers for the bearings as well as the screws for holding the rollers to the laser cut roller panels. We've got 2608 bearings for our roller assemblies. Okay, then we have a 16mm, 14mm long, 12mm long, 10mm long. These are all M3 button head style. We only need one tool, which is included. Ball head Allen key right here. And also included is a little nut trap holder for holding onto the riv nuts as we tighten things. Lay that there. And then on the seal kit, we've got our gasket kit. So this has got the side gaskets and the faceplate gasket inside of it. Right there. And then these are the sealing bars for holding the gaskets to the side panels. And then this is the latch kit, which includes the handle, the lock, and the strike plate that goes on the back panel to hold the whole thing tight against the seals when it's closed. All right, and that's everything, and we have everything that's on our bomb, so we've checked that off. We're ready to start building. All right, we're going to start by grabbing our tools. So technically, this and a Phillips screwdriver is all you should need to assemble the Repbox. It helps to have a hobby knife or scissors as well. So I'm going to lay that out now. Get the scissors off of there. Alright, so here's a look at all the tools we're going to need. Okay, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start by assembling basically the lid, the faceplate of the box. And we're going to work backwards. We're going to attach that to the exit plate and then the base panel. So take all my fasteners out. If you've got bowls or somewhere handy you want to keep your parts in, that's fine. I'm just going to leave them in the bag until I need them. Just kind of open them up and having them ready. All right, so to start, we're going to grab our hinge. The larger of the vinyl pieces on this version, later versions may use a different material. But for now, we're using marine grade vinyl. You'll notice the holes are already pre-drilled in it, and they will match up with the parts that are supposed to assemble on it. So I'm going to start with moving from the lid downward to attaching it to the bottom base plate of the box. So to start, we've got our face plate. We're going to sandwich the vinyl between. There's only one way that these holes should line up. You'll notice the hole pattern here. We're going to start with this guy facing down. Line the vinyl up on top of it. Line the faceplate on top of it as well, and we're going to put our 4 riv nuts in. So the way that these work, they're just kind of like a nut trap. Basically the flanged end is what keeps it from pulling through, and then we put our fastener sandwich through the assembly like this. So basically every one of these riv nuts that you'll see, the flange will be on the outside and it'll be threading inward with the button head on the outside like that. So these will help pin the vinyl in place where they need to go. Okay, on the other side of these, before we fasten, from the lid parts bag, you've got your magnets, the magnet catches. We need these, so we're going to lay those out. There'll be 2 of them. And then using a 10mm screw for these, we're going to do 1, 2, 3, 4 to start the sandwich. So I find that it's a little bit easier to do this one side at a time because these will actually fall out. They're not completely pressure fitted in there. But you can just tip it up like this. That side might come apart, but that's okay, we'll fix it. So I'm just holding these in with my fingers, and then I'm just going to use my fingers to start the tightening. I'll use my tool to finish the job. Really don't need to crank down on these too much. It doesn't take much pressure on the vinyl to create a good seal. You know, just quarter turn maybe after it feels snug is fine. And like I said, these kind of fell out, so it's probably better to do it one side at a time when you're setting your riv nuts in. That's okay. Get a little bit closer in here. You can see we're creating our sandwich here. And oops. Again, we're using 10mm for the magnet catches on the back side of the faceplate. And it's good to verify too that your hole patterns line up. So if you hold it up to the light, you should be able to see that if you've got these aligned right, that they're holes all the way through, which they are. The riv nuts actually do a really good job of holding themselves in place with these little teeth to keep it from spinning. So you can really just use a finger if you want, just to make sure it's not spinning around on you, but that should be enough tightness right there. And then for these 2, we're going to use 14mm button heads. And like I was saying, I like to just take out what I need for the time being so I don't get these all mixed up. So I'm going to take 2 of these, and it doesn't really matter, but I think it looks a lot better if the nylock is on the inside, so I like the button head on the outside. Extra rib nut here for later. And you'll notice you can push them through. Sometimes if they're not pushing completely through, you can actually screw them in, but you should be able to push them through. One of the reasons not to tighten everything super snug from the beginning is that you can get a little bit of a shift on the end, and if you want everything to line up and seal really snugly, it's a good idea to just kind of start with it loose and then go back and tighten stuff afterward. So flip it over, you'll have the exposed posts right here, and then just grab 2 of the nylocks and just finger tighten for now. And we'll go back in and again snug everything up at the end, making sure that everything's lined up nicely. And then that's what this is for. So basically when we do go to tighten it up, you can just set that on there, hold that with your thumbs, and then tighten the other side with the Allen key. We're not going to do that right this second though, like I said. All right, moving downward toward the base plate, we've got our exit plate. Again, these two look really similar. The difference is the one with the tabs on it is the one that is on the outside of the box. So this is the outside of the box, the side with the logo on it. We're going to lay this guy here, make sure the holes line up. They do. And then the finished side up for this one. And once again, we've got 14mm screws throughout for each of these holes right here, and we'll do the pneumatic connectors at the end. So to start, I just kind of hold it with my fingers and lay out. We should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 14mm screws. And again, so going from the outside in with the button head on the outside, make sure my holes line up. There we go, press through. And I'm just going to finger tighten a nylock on there for right now just to hold it in place, and do the 2 outside pieces to start. And that'll make sure everything's lined up and easy for the rest of it. So by having these pre-drilled, that automatically creates the proper spacing for your hinge. And you'll see it's normal to have a gap of about, it's about 8mm of vinyl for the base hinge. It's a little bit tight. So it's kind of threading in, which is fine. So again, just finger tightening for now. So we get our 2 sides in, and then it's easiest if you just stand it up and press in your other ones. You may need to actually thread. Tried to make the vinyl tight enough so that any points of air incursion were minimal, including where the hardware threads through. So got all my button heads threaded in. Poster expose. Just finger tighten some nylocks on there. And we'll move on to the next step. All right. Got all my screws, finger tighten, and you'll see we've got maybe a tiny bit of wiggle. Our tolerances are pretty tight here, but we'll go back and tighten everything up at the end. Okay, so you start to see how this is coming together. This is the front hinge on the faceplate. This is the exit plate that our filament comes out, and this is the hinge setup. Okay, so next we're going to affix our faceplate and exit plate to the base panel. Again, the finished side is the bottom of the Repbox. The unfinished side is where the track guides will sit on the inside of the box, which means that if you were to look at this, the vinyl will lay over like so. When this folds up, this is where our hinge is on the front. Okay, to start, I'm going to grab our steel reinforcement bar, and that's going to go underneath. Move this to the side for a second. Flip this over. Again, this is the bottom side. This is going to go like such, and this basically keeps the bottom of the box from sagging under the weight of your filament over time. So we're going to grab out of our bracket bag, what we need for now are 2 of the L brackets. So these are the L brackets right here. There'll be a nut trap on the top side and a hex trap on one of the faces. 2 of those. And 2 of our 20mm screws that come in the bag with the brackets. Put the ones that we're not using back for now and set them aside. And we'll start by pressing 2 of our square nuts into the L bracket on the side that accepts it. And just take our tool and press it in, and you'll be able to see that the hole is lined up. That's ready to thread. Same thing, pressing it in, and the hole is ready to thread. So that's lined up. That's a good press fit. Those should hold in place. These are going to go on the ends like such. They sit right into the track. And then the 20mm screw comes in from the other side to clamp this whole thing together. So to do that, this is probably one of the trickier parts. We're just going to flip it over and one side at a time line up one of the L brackets. That. And now we've got a sandwich in. I'm going to put the other one here just to hold it even so we don't have it flipping around on us like that. Take our vinyl hinge and lay it on top. Vinyl seal. This will actually press through. And the easiest thing to do is start with just this piece. We'll press through the 20mm. This again is a 20mm long M3 button head. Pressing through. Again, making sure the side with your strike plate or the back side of the faceplate is facing downward. Okay, and these guys are ready to go through. This is the most complicated sandwich of the whole thing. Just do one side at a time. Make sure it goes through the wood next. Stand it up. Okay, holding this one hand, lining up the threads. I'm just using my fingers to start to thread it into the nut trap, and it is. Go to the other side so it doesn't fall down on us, same thing. And again, just tightening enough so that we're not cranking down on it, and we'll go back and tighten everything up later. You'll notice that there's enough room for a lot to potentially shift in here, so we want to make sure that's snugged up in the right spot before we crank everything down. All right, now we're going to flip it over, and we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 more holes that we're going to clamp the base plate assembly with using 16mm M3 button heads. Just going to pull out 4 of those. 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, 16 for these. They're a little bit longer so that it can hold on to the steel reinforcement bar. Pressing it through. And again, you might need to do a little twisting to coax it to go through the vinyl because it's a tight seal. You should feel it start. And the nice thing about that is it'll actually hold it in place so that we can flip the thing over without them falling out. But just to be safe, I like to stand it on end anyway. Let's get them started here. Standing it up on end. So now we've got a post exposed on the other side. And the 3 nylock. Just hand tightening again for now. So again, you'll notice on the outermost ones, the button head is on the inside of the box because it needs to thread through into the L bracket. For the rest of the ones in the middle, the button head is underneath, and that makes it infinitely easier to tighten these, given that the U-channel is so narrow in this that we don't want to have to worry about trying to set this on the nut, so just flipped it over like that. So these are all hand tightened for now, which is fine. Everything already looks pretty lined up, which is good. So we can see this starting to come together right here. Just need to get this thing standing flat. So for that, we're going to put the corner brackets on the back and the other L bracket. So these are the corner brackets, the tri-corner brackets. There is no right or wrong way to orient them. They're the same dimensions on every way, so don't have to worry about spinning them. Just have to worry about getting the face going the right direction, but that should be pretty clear in a second. So for these guys, we need to set the nylocks into the print, and they're pressure fitted, so they should snap in there pretty well. If you're having a hard time snapping it in, you can take a tool. If you have something like a small nut driver like this that can actually press through, you can try it with the tool that's provided. It's helpful, but it's not quite as easy as something that allows you to press evenly on all sides. So if you have a tiny Phillips head screwdriver, a precision driver, or something like that, that helps get those pressed in. And I find you can even put it on the driver first, again with the nylon side toward your driver, and then take the side you're trying to lock it into, and then just press it in. And it'll stay nice and easy. So we're going to do that for all of these guys. Press that in. Press that in. And those are all snugged in, and they should stay. They're nice and tight. Okay, this is the last of the L brackets. This is actually going to go on the rear right here, and this is just to help reinforce to the back panel. So again, we have another square nut. Just line up in here. If the 3D print was a little rough inside, you can just kind of get in there either with a hobby knife or a screwdriver or something and clean that out, but you should have room to press in. Square nut. Okay, that's in. Ready to thread. All right, so we got all our brackets ready. So we're going to locate our rear track guide. That's the one with the 3 holes. The holes being closer to the back side. You'll see how they line up. We're not sandwiching anything, just laying it on top. And then for this, we're running 16 millimeters. For the corners. button head on the inside of the box. Push it down, and then just line up the bracket underneath, and you should be able to just finger tighten. I'm going to flip this over in a sec so you can see. So flipping it over, the corner bracket should basically line up, you guessed it, in the corner. And I'm just going to get it tight enough but not cranked down again, so we can get everything lined up at the end when we do our final tightening. Same thing with the other side. Line it up so it's in the corner, and can tighten it enough so that it just stays kind of put there. Okay. And then this L bracket goes in the third hole in the center. Again, 16 millimeters long, M3 button head goes through and into the nut trap. All right, this is our base plate assembled. We will do the center track guide when we sandwich the side panels on. We're gonna put the back panel on next before we set this whole assembly aside. That's the tallest of the plates. This should be roughly a foot tall, 12 inches. And it just goes on right here. It should key right in, and you'll notice the tabs B7, B8, sorry, it should be B6 through B12, and you can verify that the bottoms do indeed say B5 and 6, sorry, B5 through B12, B5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then to affix this basically to the back, we're just going to run .12 millimeter long. Since we only have one panel to go through each of the corner brackets and the center bracket. Tighten that to the corner bracket. The other corner here. And lastly, the L bracket. Okay, we're going to set the base assembly aside for now and move on to the top panel. All right, next thing we're going to work on is the top panel assembly and the faceplate. So for that, we're going to need these four parts. So we've got our acrylic lid, our top panel. So the finished side of the top panel is going upward. Okay, and then we've got our seal bar for the faceplate. I'm going to orient this the way that it'll actually be when it's completed. And then this is the clamp bar that's going to go on the inside or underside of the top lid. And let's get our hinge. So we've got our vinyl hinge here. Again, there's only one way that this can be oriented based on the hole configuration. The one with the holes closest to the edge is the piece that's going to go into the top plate sandwich. So without fastening anything, it's going to go face down, finish side down. We're going to do with the holes on the side closest to you laying this way, then vinyl hinge, then it goes top panel. And over here, the fire engraved part is actually on the outside of the acrylic, so that it goes acrylic, hinge, here. Now before we assemble anything, we're gonna just do the top hinge, and we're gonna leave the faceplate covered, and assemble this once the top is on, so that we don't risk scratching this, and we leave taking the masking off of it to the very end. So for right now, I'm just gonna clamp these two together, and we'll save this part for the end. Okay, next we're gonna work on our top panel assembly, top hinge. For that, we're gonna start with top panel. The finished side is the top of the box. The unfinished side is gonna be the inside of the box. This is our lid hinge. And then this is the clamp to hold the hinge on. The acrylic, we're gonna wait until the end so that we don't risk scratching it. We're gonna start by getting 3 of our 14mm M3 button heads and just laying them in the holes like this. Lift it up and let them fall into place. I'm gonna move these out of the way, and then we're just gonna lay this down really quick so that the posts stick up there, and make sure that our hinge lines up correctly. This is symmetrical, so there's really no way to flip it back and forth this way. It shouldn't matter. It's just which side is attached to the acrylic, which is top lid, and our holes match up, so this is the top lid side. And then we get our top lid clamp, and these holes will line up also with the majority of the material closest to the hinge. Okay, and then I'm just gonna thread on 3 nylocks by hand. Again, these are the M3 14mm long, and we're only doing the center 3 for now. These two are using different screws and are going to be what attaches to the corner bracket inside the box when we get to that step. Okay. So we're going to take this and set this aside for now. We're going to do the faceplate, the lid of the box in a second. Okay, moving on. We're going to do our side panels next. So again, on the side panels, the finished side is facing the inside of the box. So when these are installed, this is the box facing you. The finished side is inward like that because the steel panels that you ordered are on the outside covering the unfinished side. We're going to take these, the finished side faces the inside of the box. We're going to have them face us. First thing we need to do is add the 2 riv nuts for the bottom that are going to hold the magnet catches on. So to do that, I'm going to press them through like this. And then I'm going to hold them together, kind of pinching them together against the side so I can lay it down without having them fall back down through the hole. Same thing on this side. And stand it up on end. The flange goes on the unfinished side of the panel. I use 2 fingers to basically pinch them against the side and just lay it down so they don't fall back out. I'll take those and I'm going to set them to the sides for right now. We're going to locate our 3D printed corner brackets. These are labeled left and right with an L and an R. I'm going to clean out the nut trap with a hobby knife. And this is where we're going to press in our last 2 square nuts from our fastener bag. So our M3 square nuts press right in here. Okay, we're pressing in the square nuts. And these should bottom out exactly where they need to be. If you look at the top, you should be able to press your tool through and verify that the threading is indeed lined up with the top hole. Okay, those are set. Next thing we need to do is take 2 of our riv nuts and press them in the hole here. And if that's a tight fit, you should be able to press it in with your thumb, but if it's a tight fit, you should be able to turn it over and just press it in like that. Shouldn't need to take it back out again. You're pressing the flanged side on the side that has the lettering. So flange side is on the side that has the lettering, not the side with the route out of it. Okay, so these are ultimately going to sit, this is our left panel here, this is our right panel here. This angle will match up with the face of each of these. Okay, we're going to flip these over and we're going to locate our seal bars here. And if this is still a little bit rough, you can clean some of the char off of the routed location with a hobby knife. It's not critical, but it will allow this to stick a little bit better, and it only really needs to stick temporarily because it's the action of pinching this against the side panel that really holds these in place. But they're not really on any outward pressure, so it's just a matter of holding them in place until we can fasten them. So this is a critical component. Before you cut anything, make sure everything lines up the way that it needs to. So we're going to start with the right side. The way this is going to look when it's assembled, I'm not cutting anything yet. This is going to sit like such with the letter facing outward, seal bar on top. There are two pieces of each seal bar. You're going to start, the one with the route is going to be unfinished facing you. Then there's a finished plate that's going to go on top with smaller holes. And you know that the finished plate is the one with the finished plate because it has no route in it and it's got smaller holes in it. And that's going to lay on top of this so it looks and finishes nicely. Okay, once we get this all lined up properly, we're going to cut and set the lower faceplate gasket so that it sits in there. And repeat this for the other side. So to start, I'm going to peel just the top of the backing off of the gasket, and I'm going to let it overhang the 3D printed bracket just a bit, but just press that in place so that it's right up against it. Looks clean. It's fine if we have a little bit of overhang. You have extra to cut. Okay, and then I'm going to peel back just the amount of backing that I need to get it to seat on the seal bar. That should line up nicely. Press it down, and if we flip it over, we'll see it sits perfectly in that channel. Okay. All right, now with scissors, you're going to cut this, but we're not going to cut it flush to this line. We're going to leave a little bit of an overhang. I like to aim for right above the circle there, so you've got maybe 10 millimeters of material left over. The reason we do that is because it'll give us a nice tight seal around the faceplate when it's flipped up. Cut that. That's fine that we've got a lot of overhang for now. That's about as much overhang as you want to start with. We're going to go back and trim this all at the end. Okay, we're going to do the same process here, removing the backing. Now for the bottom part, we're going to line this up in its channel here. And you'll notice it's going to cover the holes right here. This is where actually having that soot comes in handy. We're going to press it on there and we're going to remove it. And you should be able to see where the holes were. Aren't going to have any little sawdust on there. And we're just going to take our scissors and we're going to cut little notches here and here. And then just pull this part out. So that's what your profile should look like for the bottom seal. We're going to lay it in here. And again, this is only the adhesive. Don't worry if the adhesive isn't sticking super well. It's just to hold it in place so we can get it lined up on our side panel. Throw that away. So we come back with our left side panel and we lay this over. The holes should line up. And the riv nut, tops of the riv nut will hold that in place. It's going to line up. We're going to take our top sealing bar, put that on top, making sure everything still lines up. And now we're going to grab our magnet latch out of our lid kit. You're going to take your magnet, it's going to be facing outward like that, And this is ultimately what the mag catch from the faceplate's going to lock to. So I'm going to start one at a time. We're going to take 16 millimeter, 2 of these. Just start by pushing them through. And this is adjustable, which is nice, so we can get our latch perfect. And these will just thread into the rib nuts. Make sure the holes stayed lined up. I'm not going to tighten that all the way. I want to leave it loose enough so that we can adjust. Okay, next we're gonna flip this over. This other hole right here at the top, we're gonna place a rib nut in here like this, standing it up, and it should line up with the hole in the top seal bar. There you go. That. Press through, so we're going to hold that, keeping it standing up. We're going to just take another M316, and that'll keep the top of the seal bar lined up. Now hold it with your finger to keep the rib nut from spinning, or you can press it down against the surface. The little ridges in the rib nut will keep it from spinning, and you'll feel it cinch up. Again, don't tighten it quite all the way, but enough just to hold it in place. We'll do our final adjustment in a second. So that's that side. We're going to repeat the same process with this side. So we've got our seals on. So lastly, we're going to make sure everything's lined up and snug. And we're going to trim. So with a hobby knife, I'm just going to press down and just saw this so it's flush with the top of the bracket like that. And then same thing down here at the bottom. We're going to follow the angle of the seal bar, and we're just going to saw it. If you have a box cutter, if you don't have a hobby knife, something like a box cutter, any kind of flat blade is going to be a lot easier than trying to do that with scissors. You can do it with scissors, but I prefer the hobby knife. I'd say take care with this step. The better job you do making sure it is lines up well, the better your seal will be ultimately. Watch your fingers while you're slicing. Obviously, you don't cut any digits off. All right, now we're ready to put the side panels on. All right, so going back, we're going to grab our base assembly again that we already completed. We're going to lay it on top of our left side panel and make sure all our tabs and our numbers match up. I'm looking at the bottom, B15, B16, B14, B13. Everything's lined up with the correct hole and tab. You may have to just kind of coax each of these in, but you'll see. And now, once you've seen everything is snug here, we'll get a sense of how everything fits. So we'll trim all of this stuff at the end, but this is actually going to close into this channel here. And we're not going to bolt anything just yet. We're taking a look here. And we're going to grab our top lid. Okay, and we'll just tilt this up and key the top in as best we can. Takes a little finesse. snug fit. Making sure our tabs on the top line up as well. Good, now we've got everything seated in there snugly. Everything seems to be fitting. So we're gonna make sure everything's flush. You look at your top corners and stuff, everything should be nice and lined up. And now is a good time to tighten our corner bracket so things stay in place. So we're gonna start by taking one of the last of our, we've got 2 more 20mm screws that were left in the bracket bag. I'm going to take those out. And those are what go in the last hole and attach the corner bracket to the top plate. Make sure this lines up, goes right through the vinyl and the sandwich and all the way into the nut trap of the top corner. Okay, we're not tipping anything over yet, but now we should start to have rigidity to everything. We're holding that together. Okay, prior to putting the other side panel on top, we finally get around to taking our track guide. I'm gonna lay it with the 5 spools facing forward. Just lay it in the last of the keyed slots right here. So this just keys right in there. And we take our other faceplate, our side panel. This part's a little tricky, but from the inside you'll need to hold the side panel or the track guide in place because it'll tend to want to fall out. But start by lining up your other tabs, verify that your tab numbering matches up. Okay, all our keys are seated in there, everything's nice and tight. Same thing, we're going to take our 20mm screw and fasten it in to the side. So again, 20mm, this is going all the way through the sandwich and into the nut trap of the corner bracket. So next we're going to open up our side panels. Find the one that goes on the top. And we're going to start with 12mm long. We're going through the steel, through the other side panel and into the L bracket. Hold the nylock with your finger, keep it from pushing out. And you'll feel that thread in, and it's okay to snug it down as tight as you like. Maybe tight and then a 1/4 turn. Don't need it to be too tight. Okay, we're gonna repeat the process up here on the top and then on the bottom corner as well. So again, these are all 12mm. I'm gonna need a couple, so I'm just gonna lay them all out. 12mm into the top corner bracket. So I find that not tightening these quite all the way actually sometimes helps get everything lined up. The tolerances are so tight in this thing that sometimes just a slight twist makes it hard to tighten. So make sure you get at least 2 in, make sure your holes line up, and they do. All right, so we got our 3 12mm button heads holding the side panel on. Now I'm taking care because there's really only one holding this side on. We're just going to use our hand to support. We're going to flip it over. We're going to do the same thing on the top. Okay, we got our side panels on. We are rounding the horn for the finale. We're gonna take our French cleat here. Now, it's important, even if you're not wall mounting, this is still a structural component of the box, so you wanna install this even if you're not doing the wall kit, just to add rigidity to the back corner. We're gonna take from our mount kit the two flange heads. I believe they're called lath screws. You can just start it in with your fingers. And with any Phillips screwdriver, cinch that in. Same thing on the other side. Flip it around. And these should be all pre-drilled for you, so they hopefully don't give you too much resistance. Get that nice and snug. That's good. Okay, we're gonna add our top screws. So those are the black ones. And when you put this on, obviously the triangular piece should be pointing downward. Screw holes facing up. There's really only one way it should be able to go onto the back. And tighten the top. 1 and 2. Make sure those are nice and snug. And then from the inside, we got 2 more. It's a little tougher to see. They're right up against the top here and here. I'll do it and then show you that it's done. Got those 2 here and here in. And now we've got a box. Okay. All right, next thing we're gonna do is put on, we're gonna trim our, next thing we're gonna do is trim our seal so that this can flip down. So the easiest way to do that is to lay this on top and basically look at right where it's going to butt up against the top. And you can either use a hobby knife or scissors. What I like to do is trace a line basically right up against the edge. And getting this as tight as possible will keep the seal as tight as possible. Just gently score the line. Same thing on the other side. It's always better to leave a little too much and trim more than it is to take too much, so take your time with this part and your filament will thank you later. So after that's done, you should feel the magnets start to latch. So you want to press this down and then you can, with your hands, because you shouldn't have tightened those magnet catches yet, slide those up to where they need to be. And you'll hear a good click and feel that grab. And it should be almost to the end. The magnet should be almost to the end of where it can be, and that's probably a good starting point as well. So just enough where it's putting a little bit of pressure on this gasket, and then we can tighten that up from here. And you can cinch everything down, make sure it pinches the gasket nicely against the side panel. And that's latching securely. And now we can add our seal for the faceplate. So before you peel the backing off and lay it on, just verify you should have a little bit extra. So I like to just line it up to one edge and lay it across, and then trim the side that's a little bit long. Press it to start, and then it may actually be easier if you stand it up or just get it to a place Stuff's pretty sticky. And try to keep it laying right against the faceplate as best as possible. So you'll see here, got a little bit of overhang, and for that, I'm going to start with a pair of scissors. Actually, pull like a little bit off and measure what you need. And just kind of keep removing until it's where you need it. That certainly can do it. And when you close it, you can see how it feels if it's a little too long still. Trim to taste. So the sharper your scissors, the better. So all said and done, you should have some nice seals all around. Everything should look good here. So when we get that acrylic on there, it'll be nice and tight. This is a good chance to put on our strike plate now. So for that, we go to our latch kit bag. That's got our lock, our strike plate, our handle, and our backer. So strike plate is held on with a single M316. If you want, you can try cleaning this out to have it sit better, but the route should allow for this to press in nice and snug. I'm taking a 16 millimeter long M3 bolt. And from the outside, the button head is pressing through. You need to thread it through that vinyl piece and press your printed part onto it. And make sure the printed part is sitting in the routed place, routed spot. And take a nylock and tighten it on there, and we'll start to cinch everything down. Using our little nut trap, we'll hold that there. Just tightening everything up. We'll get it laying like this. I'm going to thread in connectors. I'm just going to set this up for a standard 5. So that's basically every other hole. You should be able to tighten these pretty much with your fingers, but if you want to get them really cinched in there, you go as far as you can with your fingers, and then you can grab a pair of pliers or a spanner if you got it. Tighten it further. If you're going to set up for using more than 5 spools, if you've got half kilos or narrower spools and you need more connectors are available on the website, and more PTFE tube. So the purpose of the PTFE tube is really to keep your filament from binding in here and grinding against the metal. You can certainly configure it so that the PTFE tube goes all the way to your printer if you like. You're given a meter to work with to cut accordingly as you see fit, but you want to have at least a certain length, a small length in each one, so that the throat of this is feeding without rubbing against the inside of the tube. Another tip, when you cut the PTFE tube, if you take a hobby knife or a drill and you just bore out the end like that a little bit so that it's easier to feed, that makes things a lot easier for you. When you cut it, it'll compress. So I just feed through enough so that it's about to the middle of the magnet, and then using flush cutters or scissors. If you've got flush cutters, it seems to work a little bit easier for this. So flush cutters, I just like to leave about this much on there to direct. But again, you can configure this however you want. And then again, every time you make a cut and it compresses, if you just take a hobby knife and bore out the end, you'll have a much easier time loading. These are 4.2 millimeter bores, so they're designed to press all the way through. And again, you can seat them however you want. If you want to back it out, just push in on the plastic piece and you can back it out. And for the holes that you're not using, there's plugs that are included so that you don't just have a big old hole, and those should just press through, snap in nice and tight from the inside. The flange side will be on the inside of the box. So you see one side has a little bit of a flange to it. And if you need to take them out later, just use a screwdriver or something to press it right back through, and then you can put another pneumatic connector in there as need be. Okay. All right, so next we're gonna attach the lid stays. Now, one thing of note, there is a left and a right version of this. A lot of people have been getting these and assuming that because this one has a piece that they got a broken one. That's not the case. This manufacturer, this supplier, only creates left-handed ones, and so as a workaround until we're able to fabricate a better solution, we're basically just creating our own right-hand version by using a 10 millimeter bolt and a nylock and some washers right here to basically create the opposing side. So with the stop piece on the top, if you look at it, you're gonna basically make it so that this is on the inside, like such. Getting close. So again, that's on the top, and this is gonna be on the inside, and basically we're gonna take a 10 millimeter and it's important the direction that this actually bolts on. So 10 millimeter, we're gonna take washer out of the lid stay bag, the same bag that had the stays in it. Start it there. Again, make sure that this part's up, go through the outside here. And the bolt, the nylock rather, is gonna sit on this side where the lid support piece is. So same thing, sandwich it through, add a washer, and then finger tight on the nylock for now. You can adjust the tightness however you want, but actually cinching on that will help keep the lid open more readily. Same thing with where we clamp it down here. So we're going to take our lid stays now. And with them folded, this one is going to go on the left side. So the one that we built is going on the left side. If you're looking at it from the top. Left one's going on this side. Right one here like this. We're going to do the right first. Okay, so also inside the lid and faceplate bag, there were two 25 millimeter screws. Those basically go through the last of the holes that you see on the side panel. And it should be really snug because we want that post not to wiggle on us and keep the lid open easily. So I'm going to thread it all the way through. Okay, on the left side, all we need is a washer up against the post. And then our lid stay, you can unfold it and lay it down here. Washer. And a nylock. Just a little tight for now, but again, the more you tighten this, the more readily the lid will stay open for you. So I'll leave it laying down. Okay, on this side, we're gonna grab out of our roller bag one of these bushings. I'm gonna screw this post in on the other side first. Again, another 25mm screw. Threading it in from the outside of the side panel. This passes completely through, so it's nice and rigid. Let me take one of these spacers. Press it on, thread it on. And a washer. Open that up, lay it like that. Another washer. And another nylock. Finger tighten. Should be basically tight enough so they can stand up on their own. And again, you can tighten these to taste. A little bit tighter. All right. Last step. Move our box out of the way. Well, last step before we do the rollers. We're gonna peel off the satisfying feeling of peeling the paper backing off the acrylic. And this stuff scratches really easily, so take your time, don't scratch it. The more you touch it, the more it's gonna smudge. If you wanna keep it nice and crystal clean, keep your fingers off it. Good luck with that. Either side, doesn't matter, they're symmetrical. Basically gonna attach the lid to the top hinge, lay it on top of here. So for this, I like to start with our engraved piece and the box facing you, just lay it on top of the hinge, and we just push some 14s. I'm gonna start with just one of the 14mm long M3 button heads. And just press it through there. Okay, one, hold it in place, grab a nylock, and basically finger tighten. And repeat. Go to the ends. Make sure your holes are lined up. They are. Okay, again, these are all 14 millimeters, just like the other faceplate was. Flip it all the way open. And just hand tighten on an eye lock. Go back through and tighten the rest up. Again, tight and then maybe a quarter turn. You don't want to crank down on this too much. We don't want to crack the acrylic. So again, just tight, a little bit of a turn. Just enough to compress the vinyl hinge. Quarter turn. Alright. Almost there, just got to attach our lid stays in our handle. So, lid stays. When they're closed, they're going to fold up like this. We're going to use 10 millimeter screws and nylocks through here. Just start with one to hold it in place, and we'll use one of the lid stays to hold it so we can more easily do the other side. That. And they work. Huzzah. So the reason we added a second lid stay is because of this living hinge style. If you have one stay the way we did in the original design, it twists the lid on the vinyl hinge, which doesn't last as long. It doesn't allow it to close and seal as effectively. So we added a second one, and now all is well. Tighten those down, get a close-up of that. So again, 10 millimeters, nylock on the other side. Don't tighten it quite all the way until you get the second one in there so you know they're lined up. Again, you don't need to over tighten these. Just a little bit. You don't want to crack the acrylic. Only when it feels snug. And they work. So now's a good opportunity. Close it down. Make sure everything looks like it's sealing well against all the gaskets. You'll see when you press on it, it'll compress them, which is good, which is exactly what we want. So I'm going to put the lock and the handle on. Again, inside the latch kit. So the handle with the latch goes horizontally, presses in, and will go above where the lock is. The lock goes in the second hole. If you had the non-latching kit, the handle runs vertically to cover those holes. And with a 12 millimeter M3 button head that we have left, we take our little backer disc. I like finish side toward the button head. Not that it really matters, but I'm fancy. And we thread that into our nice handle here. It's a nice good grab, that's on there. Yank away at the lid. Take out the latch. 2 keys, one for you and your significant other. This filament theft is at an all-time high now. I don't know if you knew that. People breaking into people's houses, stealing their filament. It's a sad state of affairs. So, simple, press in the lock kit. If you want to leave your blue protectant, chrome protectant on, you can. If you're like me and you get satisfaction out of peeling it off, peel it off. And with the little rigid side of the lock, probably doesn't matter too much, but thread that on and cross-threading it. And if you want to grab a pliers or whatever to crank down, you can, but you shouldn't need to. Okay, the latch is hooking around the tab on the lid stay as such when it's closed, so you want the hook facing downward in this up configuration. It is right now. If we take the key and twist it, it'll go. Let me show you that from here. This is the correct locking mechanism. When it's locked, with the Phillips screwdriver, you can tighten that on there. And we have locking. So tip, take one of these off if you don't want it to potentially scratch your acrylic when it's just dangling around in there, flipping up and closed. And if you want, you can print a nice little handle. If you don't want to take the key out, you can just leave it in there as a lock. You can put something around that to make it easier to latch. Maybe it will release something. And it should lock. And we also have the benefit of seeing a nice compression on our seals. So that's that. And that completes the assembly of the Repbox itself. So the last thing we need to do is do our rollers. We're going to do that now. Set our box aside. Grab our roller panels, our roller hardware, and our bearings. Get rid of our trash. Whoops, that's not trash. Put this back. This is our wall mount kit. We'll go over a wall mount in a second. So the rest of the nylocks we have left are going to go to our rollers. You may have some extra screws. We like to try to throw in a few extras here and there in case stuff gets lost. Okay, we're going to start by taking our panels out. So every box ships with 16 of these, which is enough to do 5 kilos, 5 rollers, or rollers for 5 kilos, should I say. So the ones at the end are going to be singles, and the ones in the middle are what we call doubles, so they're actually going to sandwich 3 wide. So we'll start with a single. For the singles, you're going to open up the bag, lay everything out. You'll notice we've got 8 of the longer screws. These are 35mm long M3 button heads. Set those over here, and we've got 4 of the 22mm, which are the shorter ones. The shorter ones are what go to the single rollers, and those are the rollers that go in the end. So push them through so you got your posts sticking up. Thread your bushings over top. Take a bearing, lay it on there. Another bearing, lay it on there. Take another bushing with the flat side, flange side sticking up this time. So prior it was flange side was down. That completes our sandwich there. Then we're just going to finger tighten a nylock. And you don't need to super crank down on these, but you want them tight enough so that they're not wobbling and they're held together. The bushings will basically allow the bearing to still spin and not flop around. Okay, that's a single. Now we're going to do a double. Same process. You're going to take 3 of the laser cut panels and press through the longer 35mm. Lay it flat so the posts are sticking up. Bushing with the flange end down. Bearing. bearing, bushing, flange end sticking up. Panel. You following along at home? Bushing, flange end down again. Repeating it just like we did a single again. Bearing, bearing, flange up, pushing with the flange up, and the panel, and 2 nylocks. Now once again, you're gonna have 2 of the singles and 4 of the doubles when you're done. Make sure that's right. Yes, that's right. 2 singles, 4 doubles. So in this one, I find it easier if you actually hold the Allen key still and use the nut driver to tighten. Not super tight, tight enough. You should see, feel the bearings will still spin just fine. The bushings do a great job holding them off and allowing them to spin. So, repeat. So again, these marks are a rough guide. You may have different results depending on what spools you're using. See how smooth that rolls right there? Oh, that's so satisfying. So you have enough wall anchors for all 3 of the holes in your cleat if you're wall mounting. If you can, these are spaced 16 inches apart, so if you can find a stud and you want to hang it on a stud, great. If not, it's always good to find 1 stud if you can, but the 3 anchors that are included in the mounting kit are strong enough to hold 75 pounds each, so they're more than sufficient even if you're just hanging straight on drywall. Most of the weight is in shear downward on the wall, so it's, unless you're trying to hang on the thing, you're really you're gonna have a hard time pulling it off the wall. It's pretty solid, but let's start by screwing in anchors where is needed. In this one, I've already set the anchors, and the center one's on a stud. So I like to start with the center so that I can line up my anchors. The easiest thing to do is do your center first, if you can, on a stud, or at least wherever you want it. Drill the hole for the center and set the anchor if need be, or put it on the stud, put a level on it. All right, so start with the center, set the anchor or put it on a stud, put a level on it, make sure that it's where it needs to be, and then drill 2 other guide holes here and here. You can either drill them or you can start by just screwing into the wall and marking where the holes are, and then rotate this and set anchors if need be. rotate back on and then make sure your holes line up. If you happen to have a power drill, makes this a lot faster. Less work on the, less likelihood of carpal tunnel. Stay safe out there, people. Cinch everything up. Take your Repbox, preferably facing away from you. Ooh. Heavy. This is a preloaded Repbox. Make sure you're pressed firmly against the wall and let it sit down onto its cleat. Inspect the sides. This concludes our assembly video. Thank you for watching and enjoy your Repbox.